Señora Vicerrectora de Relaciones Internacionales y Cooperación para el Desarrollo, señor Decano de la Facultad de Educación, Dear President of the PME, distinguished guests, respected speakers, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 45th Conference of the International Group for the Psychology of Mathematics Education, PME45. Good afternoon, everyone from the city of Alicante in Spain. Our names are Ángela Buffon and Juan Manuel González Forte, and it is a honor for us to present the opening ceremony of the PME45. In fact, we have to say good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to those people who follow us on streaming from all over the world, who unfortunately couldn't come to Alicante due to travel restrictions or health issues. Thanks to each and every one of you for coming to Alicante or joining us online. This is a very exciting event. We are really happy to be able to organize the PME45 on site, again as usual. It means that we are really pleased that we can meet face-to-face again to share and discuss our projects and contributions, having the opportunity to share experiences together. However, for those who couldn't come, we would like them to be part of the conference as well. In this sense, the local committee has provided a virtual platform so that they can attend the plenary sessions and have the possibility of presenting and discussing their contributions. We have prepared some information about our country, our culture, and the most important tips that you must know during your stay in Alicante. Let's start by talking about our location. As most of you already know, Alicante is located in the south of Europe, between Portugal and France, and very close to Africa. We are a Mediterranean country, so our climate is attractive to many tourists from all over the world. Especially the Valencian community, the region that Alicante is part of, has most of its territory bordering the Mediterranean Sea, as can be seen on the map. However, being a Mediterranean country means that the temperature in summer is ideal for going to the beach, but not so much for working. The weather forecast for this week indicates that we will have an average temperature of 30 degrees. That is why we will have given you a fan like this so that you can use it when necessary. Let's show you how we open it here in Spain and how to move it to obtain the freshest air. In addition, it is important that you are well hydrated. That is why we have also provided you a bottle of water in order to drink. Let's follow showing you a little about our traditions and culture.
you have enjoyed a bolero, the Bolero Bay. In English, we could translate it as the old bolero. A bolero is a musical piece characterized by being slower and at the same time, but its elegance. The bolero has a noble and majestic character, and it is used to be danced by people of high social class as entertainment of their social parties. Uy, ¿qué ha pasado? Sorry. Due to the history and the passage of the centuries, Spain has a cultural richness in various aspects. One of these is traditional dance and music. Traditional dance is changed throughout the country, not only in terms of music style and dance, the choreography, musical instruments and clothing also change. Regarding clothing, in the northern area, it is a warmer due to the temperature of this area. In the Balearic Islands, a veil on the head is typical. In Andalusia, the ruffles. And if we focus on our area, we can talk about two different dresses, depending on the century. On the 19th century, women were covered up of the neck and men wore long trousers. However, in the 18th century, women wore necklines and brightly colored skirts, and men wore short trousers called saraway. The latter is the one worn by the dancers. The instruments also change according to the area. In the north, the gaita and the tambourine are typical. In the south, the guitar and the castanets. In the Balearic Islands, the tamboril, the flabiol, and the castanet larger than the typical ones. And in the Valencian community, as you have seen before, we use the chirimita and the tabalet.
Something that also characterizes us is the food. As we have already mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, we are a Mediterranean country, and therefore we have a Mediterranean diet with a great diversity of ingredients. We wanted to prepare a map with some of the typical dishes of our country, such as food and wine in the north, meat and cheese in the center, or paella in our area. Paella is the typical dish of the Valencian community. You can eat it in many places and of many types. There are paellas with seafood, with meat, with vegetables, etc. On the other hand, we are also known for our famous tapas. If you prefer to eat a little of everything, accompanied by a good beer or a good glass of wine, we recommend that you try the croquetas, albóndigas, calamar a la romana, ensaladilla rusa, and the famous tortilla de patatas.
Another aspect that characterizes Spain is the language diversity. The different official languages in our country are Galician, Basque, Catalan, Majorcan, and in our area, Valencian. During these days, you are going to listen to people who speak both Spanish and Valencian languages. Let's show you some expressions that you can learn and use. De categoría. For example, if a waiter asks you how was your food, or someone asks you about how was your excursion, you can say, de categoría. Another one, che que bo. When you drink a very cold beer in the heat, you can say, che que bo. La mare que va. When something surprises you, or something unexpected happens, imagine how hot is it, and if the fan breaks, you can say, la mare que va, okay? Mone or nemon, this is a colloquial expression to indicate that two or more people is leaving. It's normally accompanied by a movement of the head to indicate the exit, nemon. And finally, au. Au is to say goodbye. In Spanish, you can say goodbye saying adios, or in Valencian, adeu. But Valencian people informally say, au.
We would like also to inform you about the orography of our territory. Alicante is characterized by the combination of beaches and mountains. This means that you can be swimming in the beach with a view of the mountains or hike through the mountains with a beautiful views of the sea. This is a short list with some of the mountains and beaches close to Alicante city, which you can visit if you extend your stay here in Alicante. For example, Puig Campana is a well-known mountain in Alicante, which those of you who have chosen the excursion to Benidorm or Villajoyosa can see it. In the Sierra de Bernia, you have a spectacular view of the sea from the top, and the Sierra del Cabezodor, very close to here, can be seen on the excursion to the El Campello and Canelobre caves. On the other hand, we also wanted to highlight some of the most beautiful beaches and calas. We use the term calas to refer to small beaches. These are some examples of calas that you can find in the coast of Alicante. Cala del Mig is located in El Campello, where one of the excursions take place. El Racó del Conill is located in Villajoyosa, where another excursion also takes place. And finally, Cala Pinets in Benissa, in the north of Alicante, is another option to extend your stay here.
Costumes. This is an interesting point. The most typical costume in Spain is siesta. After lunch comes siesta time. Most Spaniards lie down on the sofa to sleep half an hour before continuing with work or activities in the afternoon. Unfortunately, with this week, we weren't able to do it due to the PME schedules. We leave it for Saturday. Timetables. As for meal and times, in Spain we usually eat 5 times a day. Breakfast, when we get up. Almuerzo, about 11. We have a coffee, a toast, a piece of fruit as a snack. Lunch at 2 p.m. Merienda, another snack, around 6 p.m. And finally, dinner, between 9 p.m. and 10 p.m. These timetables are quite different from the rest of Europe or another continent. Following, we are going to show you another traditional dance from this area, Les Vetes de Sueca. This dance is danced in Corpus Christi, a religious act that takes place in June. This dance is made up of 8 people who wear colored ribbons. We hope you like it. Okay, then. So right now we are going to proceed to the opening remarks of this opening ceremony. First, we have the honor to have here today representing the Magnífica Rectora of the University of Alicante, Amparo Navarro Fauste, the Vicerrectora de Relaciones Internacionales y Cooperación para el Desarrollo, Doña Rosa María Martínez Espinoza. Thanks to the Rectora, this conference we held today here at the University of Alicante.
President of the International Group for the Physiology of Mathematics Education, Marco Hanula. I hope I have pronounced it correctly. If not, apologize for that. Dean of the Faculty of Education, Professor José María Esteve. Local Chair of the Congress, Professor Zeneida Fernández. Academic authorities, researchers, students, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon and welcome you all to the University of Alicante, and especially welcome you all to those coming from abroad. With my first words, I would like to thank the organizers, especially Professor Salvador Ginares and Professor Zeneida Fernández, as members of the local organizing committee, for giving me the chance to be here today on behalf of the University of Alicante as part of the Rector Dean. For me, it's a great honor and a privilege to welcome you all to the opening session of this PM45 annual conference, a conference accounting for 550 attendants from up to 35 countries, thus revealing this conference as a high-impact academic and scientific event in this field of knowledge. To all of those people following the conference by streaming, welcome too. As you may know, the University of Alicante is located in the southeast of Spain and is one of the youngest Spanish universities. As you can see the campus currently, the university is just around 42 years old. But despite this fact, it's a well-reputed institution, not only because of the study programs, but also due to the innovative research carried out by many research groups in most fields of experimental sciences, social sciences, and humanities. In fact, the University of Alicante enjoys relevant positions in the main world ranking for higher education institutions, like the Shanghai ranking, the QS, and the THE ranking. Currently, the University of Alicante is an international campus with around 3,800 academic and administrative staff members and over 32,000 students enrolled in official degrees, master degrees, and PhD programs. On the other hand, our university accounts for around 650 bilateral agreements with an overall of 360 universities, which make it possible to welcome about 1,500 students every academic year and 2,000 students from other regions of our country. Regarding the specific topic of this conference, I would like to highlight that our institution is also a reference in the field of mathematics, mathematical education, psychology, and innovative tools to teach the aforesaid areas due to its academic offer, not only at the degree level, but also at master and PhD levels. Finally, it's worth it to mention the role of the university in transferring knowledge and good practices in mathematics education, in early childhood education, in primary and secondary education too, thus contributing to a better future for the understanding of mathematics at all educational levels. For this reason, I should say that you today are in a nice campus with a good environment attending to a fruitful conference to contribute to social needs regarding to this topic. To finish my words, I would like to wish you all a successful conference, sharing new knowledge, consolidating collaborations, and looking for new partners for research in the near future. I hope you find some free time to enjoy Alicante, because I have to say it's one of the most beautiful cities in Spain, and probably you find the time to enjoy the beaches, the tapas, as the master ceremony suggested. So once again, thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much for your attention. Enjoy the conference. Enjoy Alicante. Thank you.
Thanks, Vice-Rectora, for your welcoming. We invite now the Dean of the Faculty of Education, Don José María Esteve Faubel, who has also supported us in doing this event.
Muy buenas tardes. Estimada vicerrectora, estimada directora de departamento Zeneida, señor presidente de la conferencia, es para mí todo un honor dirigirme a ustedes en nombre de la Facultad de Educación. Voy a ser muy breve, no por hacerlo en castellano, ya que encima se me niegan aquí a hacer de traductores, los dos presentadores, pero que ya me encargaré cuando venga a la facultad. Lo primero es agradecerles a todos ustedes que estén aquí presentes. Ya tuvimos un evento hace un par de años, antes de la pandemia, que fue todo un éxito dentro del mundo de la didáctica de las matemáticas, y yo no me voy a extender ya con lo que ha aportado la vicerrectora sobre el tema. Simplemente diré que la didáctica en general para todo el mundo de la educación no es que es necesaria, es que es la piedra angular. Sin didáctica no hay futuro, sin didáctica no hay enseñanza, sin didáctica no hay maestros que siembren la semilla para que en un futuro se tengan alumnos en cualquier otra facultad que no sea la propia de educación, incluida la propia de educación. Yo, por mi parte, siempre digo lo mismo en este sentido. Si sale algo bien es porque el departamento al que tengo el gusto de tener dentro de la facultad lo organiza todo extraordinariamente. Si sale algo mal es que este decano en algo se ha despistado, que eso es lo que suele ocurrir en más de una ocasión y en más de dos. Por lo tanto, muchísimas gracias, daros la bienvenida. Espero que no pasen mucho calor y que les hagan caso con la botellita de agua, el sombrerito y demás. Los que estamos acostumbrados no lo necesitamos tanto, pero para mis colegas, y digo mis colegas porque durante mucho tiempo yo he ido mucho a los países anglosajones, sobre todo a Noruega, a Suecia y a Finlandia, he ido bastante. Estas temperaturas y demás son un poco calurosas. Así es que bienvenidos a Alicante, disfruten y seguro que de este congreso sale algo maravilloso, tanto para ustedes como para la Universidad de Alicante. Muchísimas gracias. Thank you very much.
Many thanks for your words. He talked about the importance of the teaching and learning of the mathematics and in general the didactics of whatever area. Okay, thank you very much. Following, we invite Zeneida Fernández, the chair of the PME45.
Okay. Thank you, Vicerrectora de Relaciones Internacionales y Cooperación para el Desarrollo, doña Rosa Martínez Espinosa, señor Decano de la Facultad de Educación, don José María Esteve Faubel, President of PME, Marco Janula, colleagues, friends, it is a pleasure for me to be here today. After a challenging year of work, and the uncertainty of the pandemic, the local organizing committee is pleased that PME45 has finally able to held in person. From the local organizing committee, we would like to welcome all of you. Firstly, I would like to express my gratitude to the International Committee for the trust placed in us to organize PME45. That started its journey 4 years ago. Especially to the President Marco Janula and the President-elect Wim van Doren for all the support and advice given during this year. And also to the International Program Committee for the hard work in the scientific activities during this year. Secondly, I would like to thank the University of Alicante for the support received not only concerning the facilities, but also all the support received from the administrative staff, technicians, designers, etc., because there is a big group of people that has made this conference possible. Finally, thanks my colleagues from the Department of Innovation and Didactic Training, PhD students and graduate students for your time, work, and support in stressful moments. Looking at the numbers, there are 524 people registered to PME45 from 48 different countries. Here, you have the list of the countries and the number of people. We are sure that this wide range of countries representing different educational contexts and theoretical perspective will strengthen our discussions during the conference. Regarding the scientific activities, we are delighted to have 4 plenary lectures, a plenary panel, a national presentation, 122 research reports, 161 oral communications, 86 posters, 4 research forums, 6 working groups, and a seminar. Thank you to each PME participant for making your journey to PME45 in Alicante and contributing to this conference. And thank you to the 243 reviewers who had given us their time and expertise and who did not hesitate to help us when we approached them and asked for their help. Apart from the scientific activities, the local organizing committee has prepared some social activities. The reception today, 2 happy hours on Tuesday and Thursday, an excursion on Wednesday, and the conference dinner on Friday. We hope these activities will allow you to learn a little more about our culture and traditions and give you the opportunity to interact with each other in a more relaxed atmosphere. We hope that PME45 conference will be fruitful and meet your expectations, as it has been prepared with great eagerness and effort. The local organizing committee is at your disposal for anything you may need. So, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Zeneida. Finally, we invite Professor Marco Janula, the President of the International Group of the Psychology of Mathematics Education.
Buenas tardes. It's such a pleasure to see you after a long break. We waited for this. Finally, we're here. Muchas gracias, Universidad de Alicante. Thank you, Vice Rector Rosa Maria, for your university's support for organizing this conference. Thank you, Dean, Faculty of Education, Jose Maria Estue-Fabuel. Without your support, we wouldn't have been able to make this fulfilled as wonderfully as I expect it to be. I want to say also big thank you to Seneda for being the soul and spirit of organizing this conference. You've been putting a hard work. It's been a pleasure to collaborate with and provide the little support that you got from us. You were having a wonderful team with you. It seems like it's the beginning of a wonderful conference. There's been a long break. So I remind you of some things that PME is known for. There may be some junior researchers who have been 2 years in isolation and this is your first conference, and there may be people who had very few conference experiences before the break, and also experienced ones. You learned bad habits during online participation only. I'm reminding you of the PME spirit and the practices that we established. I love PME conference because people come here not just to present their research, but more importantly, to engage in deep, scientifically meaningful discussion. People come here more to listen to others' ideas than to just preach their own ideas. We are organization with very low hierarchy. So those who are junior researchers, you shouldn't be shy about approaching senior researchers and engaging in discussion. People are delighted if you're interested in the same topic. We don't use titles. We don't share tasks according to academic career. We do some kind of thresholds. You have to have your papers accepted before you get to review others' papers. And you have to have a paper accepted as a research report to chair another research report. These chairing opportunities are places where you are given opportunity and responsibility to guard and tend for the PME spirit. Some things that I want to remind you: being supportive for those who are new researchers and not maybe able always to formulate their issues and questions very well, especially those, the majority of us, for whom English is not the first language or even the second language. Those of us who are fluent in English and feel confident, remind ourselves not to speak too fast, not to make too complex the communication. Clarity is our goal. Sometimes we get excited at the front of the other people, so we might speed up when we do our presentation, but any of us, even if you self are able to follow the presentation, please stand up and ask, could you please slow down so that everyone can follow the presentation? We are still having COVID among us. The conference participants have done their best to help lower the probabilities. We heard from the MERGA conference there was lots of spread of the disease. We are doing our best to reduce it. So let's wear masks when we are inside and in near connection. Let's use the hand sanitizer and wash our hands. You were given the COVID test. Do it and check that you are not carrying the germ without clear symptoms. If later during the conference you develop symptoms, any mild symptoms of flu, please ask for another test from the organizers to check that you are not the one spreading disease. We have people among us who are compromised with their immune system. We are caring for them. Another fruit of the COVID era is that we have people who are not able to travel yet. But that's also an opportunity to try how the hybrid format fits together to our conference. We have some sessions that are online. It's a new thing, we are learning about it. And we would be grateful for any feedback if you, as an audience here on site, or someone who is presenting online, or someone who is in audience online, how you experience this part of the program. We are keeping in mind that this could be, in future, an increasing part of our conference. But if it doesn't work, it's not worth investing in. So the feedback and how to develop that part of the program is very important. One more thing I want to tell, that PME is a democratic organization, very democratic. So it's the membership who has highest authority, and we are very welcoming for people. We have an annual general meeting on Friday, and we have a policy meeting earlier. Policy meeting is because the annual general meeting is so packed with program that it's hard to have a good discussion. So issues that require more thorough discussion are in the policy meeting. Also, it's a place where you can raise your own issues for the public discussion with the international committee people. So please come to the policy meeting, participate in the discussion, especially if you have any concerns or any worries that you want to raise and bring to the knowledge of the IC. Any of you can also be elected to the International Committee. We get nominations until Thursday. You will get email about how the election works. Follow your email. If it goes to the junk mail, you will find it, but if you don't get it, so ask for information how to find it. Some important decisions that we are going to make in the Constitution. During the pandemic, we were forced to organize some of our conferences online. That's not according to our Constitution to organize a general meeting of the society online. But we are going to amend our Constitution so that in the future, we can allow members who are not able to travel to the conference venue to participate in the political decision-making of PME. What are the policies for organizing conferences? What are the policies around publications and all that? So these issues will be handled in the AGM, and you can, and the Constitution is the important part where we define how we work. We will also have an issue about how we elect our new members. So we're moving from single majority or relative majority voting to positional voting, which is more democratic in a way, or better reflects the membership's views than the existing one. We are also establishing ourselves a document on our publication ethics. We have had ethics as part of our review process, but now we're kind of specifying more clearly what are the ethical guidelines that we follow as an organization. That document is important for our future scientific work, so you should familiarize yourself with the document and join us in the AGM to approve it for our future guideline. Important documents related to these decisions are appearing in the PME website on the members' password-protected site where there is AGM forum. So in order to be able to make meaningful decisions in the AGM, please familiarize yourself with the documents beforehand. So when I got to be a president 3 years ago, I thought I would have this pleasure more than just once in my lifetime. I declare this conference open.
Thank you very much, Professor Markku Hanula, for your remarks. We are approaching to the end, so we enjoy to another dance. In this case, at Jota, La Jota de Bañeres. Bañeres is a mountain town located 30 minutes from Alicante. Historically, the Jota is the basis of the music at the time, and from it appeared the other variety styles. Fandangos, malagueñas, seguidillas. Jotas are usually lively and musically faster. We hope you enjoyed watching these dancers and musicians. Thank you very much, grup de danses Centener and colla de dolçainers i tabalaters Els Valerios.
And now give us some minutes to inform you about the most important locations you must know during the conference, about the COVID restrictions, and about the agenda for today. The four plenaries, the plenary panel, the AGM, and the Research Forum 4 will be held here in the Paraninfo. The national presentation, the Research Forum 1, and the policy meeting will be held in the Salón de Actos, located in the Faculty of Education. The rest of the sessions will be held in the classrooms of the Faculty of Education. And finally, Club Social 1 and Plaza de Europa will be the places to have lunch and where the welcome reception and the gala dinner will take place. On the other hand, we also want to inform you about the COVID restrictions. In Spain, there are no restrictions inside buildings. However, the University of Alicante and the PME45 local organizing committee strongly recommend wearing masks in conference rooms and other crowded situations. In addition, using masks in public transport and hospitals is compulsory, so you have to bring a mask for the excursion on Wednesday. If any of you need a mask during the conference, we will have some of them in the conference office. Well, regarding the agenda, in a few minutes, it will start the plenary session 1. We are honored to have our invited speaker, Professor Laurinda Brown, from the University of Bristol in United Kingdom. After the plenary session at 8 o'clock, it will take place the welcome reception in Plaza Europa, next to this building. So, ladies and gentlemen, from the local organizing committee, we wish you a PME45 meeting scientifically and socially successful. We hope that your visit and stay in Alicante will be exciting, informative, and inspiring. Thank you very much.
esta también. Ah, pues llévatelas, ¿no? Para que no te coja la... Y
Vale, ya está. Vale. Aquí tienes el puntero y ya está. ¿Te traigo botellas?
tráete alguna de allí, porque esta la he esta llévatela. Llevaros si queréis las que vale, están empezadas, sí, para que la gente no se confunda. Los updates, cuando hagan los temas separadores, subís y ya.
Lo hago yo, porque Angela no sabe.
Si no pasa nada.
¿Si no qué?
Pero bueno, mejor si lo hago.
Yo por preparármelo.
So, good afternoon, everybody. We are going to start the plenary session. So, as you can see, Salvador Linares, the chair of the session, is not here today. He was looking forward to this moment, but due to health issues, it has not been possible. So I am going to read what he has prepared to introduce our first plenary speaker, Laurinda Brown, in his words, okay, in his words. For me, it's a pleasure to introduce Laurinda Brown from University of Bristol as the first plenary lecturer in the PME45 at Alicante. Although she is retired, she follows supporting to her colleagues. She was a mathematics teacher before her university position as a mathematics teacher, educator at University of Bristol, in which she worked with graduates in mathematics wanting to obtain a qualification as a teacher. Laurinda has a large trajectory as member of PME. Her first PME was PME18 in 1994 in Lisboa, Portugal, 28 years ago. And from the first time she got involved in the Teachers and Researchers Working Group, she has run different PME working groups and discussion groups related to mathematics teacher education and teachers as researchers. This has allowed her to generate many academic collaborations and good friends all over the world. Her implication at the different groups in PME goes beyond to PME conferences, and she has helped to some contributors in different PMEs to develop their ideas into special issues of mathematics education journals. She has been chief editor of the International Journal for the Learning of Mathematics and an associate editor of International Journal of Science and Mathematics Education. She has also served to the PME organization, developing different services to PME community. She was elected to be part of the IC in Singapore, 2017, and she became the treasurer undertaking an important work with administration and finances of PME. She declares herself as an activist. She introduced me to interesting discussions about activism during long walks through Bristol, and also about a way of seeing and thinking about what means be a mathematics teacher educator. For that, it is not strange that the title of her plenary lecture is Stories of Observing, Interviewing, and Researching in Collaborative Groups to Develop Mathematics Teaching and Learning. She has summarized a way of being and working with mathematics teachers through stories, documenting her research journey through 3 actions: observing, interviewing, researching in collaborative groups. So she tells us stories of her developing research practices and interrogates how she sees what she sees and do what she does. As she has repeated many times, from my present and activist position, knowing is doing. Welcome, Laurinda, to Alicante, and thanks for sharing a particular way of seeing our work as mathematics teacher educator.
I did not think one day that I would stand here. It will take me a minute to get myself organized. And I want to thank Salvador. I'm feeling a bit sad because Salvador and I worked together for many years, meeting after the Belo Horizonte conference when we went up into the mountains in Brazil, working with a community there of research PhDs. Can I just check that at this speed, the people at the back can hear me? So just put your hand up at the back. Okay, great, thank you. Using the context of comparing and contrasting 3 papers from early in my career with 3 recent papers, I tell stories of my developing research practices, interviewing, observing, and researching in collaborative groups. The whole is focused on learning. So, as Salvador would have said, as Thaneda said, and thank you for that, I attended my first PME in Lisbon as a mature professional, having recently moved from being a mathematics teacher to being a mathematics teacher educator. I still thought of myself as a teacher. It seemed natural for me to attend the Teachers as a Researcher in Mathematics Education Working Group, led by Judy Mosley, RIP, Vicky Zack, and Chris Breen. They invited me to contribute in a small way to the following year's conference, where I also presented my first research report. For some of you here today, it will be your first research report, your first conference. What began for me was many fruitful academic collaborations and friendships with colleagues interested in the development of teachers of mathematics, and later the development of mathematics teacher educators. In Recife, I found my theoretical position in activism at a discussion group led by Rafael Nunes and Laurie Edwards. Another participant, David Reed, who will be reacting to this talk, became a close collaborator. From my present and activist position, knowing is doing. What I do brings forth my world of knowing, and my world of knowing is what I do. In an activist terms, our history of structural coupling with our environment leads to patterned actions. So that's about as jargony as this will get. Chairs may look quite different, but we recognize them as a chair, what you're sitting in now. Basic level categories are not actual behaviors, but they are how we label the same actions, such as a chair being a sitting on object, it's for sitting on. In the same way, a teacher may label a range of teaching strategies with their purpose, say, sharing ideas. The theme of this conference, Mass Education Research Supporting Practice, is central to my own research. In this plenary presentation, I look back over a life spent observing and interviewing maths teacher educators, teachers and students of mathematics, researching in collaborative groups and attending PME, asking what any implications there might be to take forward into the future of mathematics, teaching and learning. So, the title of this talk includes the word stories. What comes to mind when you think of this word? Many years ago, on reading a draft of a proposed PME paper written by myself and Alf Coles, who I saw over there somewhere, the story of silence, teacher as researcher, researcher as teacher, a mentor of mine commented that we needed to change the title because readers would think the paper was fictional. For me, the word story had a technical meaning. Bateson talks about the pattern which connects, a story being a little knot or complex of that species of connectedness that we call relevance. So I might, from time to time, as I'm talking, say this is an example of relevance. That paper, with story in its title, became the first in a series of PME papers documenting the research journey with Alf Coles. This presentation looks back over my research, looking for distillations that are relevant within this context of pattern through time. I do this by focusing on three aspects of my research, practices that have been present across my work through time, interviewing, observing, and researching in collaborative groups. Firstly, focusing on three papers from early in my career to identify themes across all three aspects. Then focusing on three recent papers, each with insights from one of the aspects to address where I am now. Finally, I will then look forward briefly to the future. I have been helped in the process of interrogating my early experiences through hour-long online meetings with Alf Coles. It's very disturbing for me to be here because I have lived in isolation since the beginning of COVID. When we worked together on a one-year course with a group of prospective teachers at the University of Bristol, talking together after sessions became ritualized in what we came to call reciprocal narrative interviewing. We would take turns in questioning each other to uncover new awarenesses. It seemed natural to use this process to capture the origins of themes that have been with us since 1995, when we started to work together. Having both read each of the first 3 papers before meeting, we spent about 20 minutes talking through what we had been struck by. The rest of the hour was spent with Alf narratively interviewing me. So, the first paper. Firstly, I remembered a paper that was not written by me, but by Joan Yates. Joan worked at the University of Bristol School of Education as a mathematics teacher-educator when I was a young teacher. In 1979, it feels a long time ago now, I was a teacher of mathematics in a school for students aged 11 to 18. After studying mathematics at university, in 1973-4, I completed a 1-year postgraduate course to obtain a teaching qualification. I had been teaching for about 5 years when I was invited to join a small group, 3 members, facilitated by Joan Yates. The work of this group was written up in an FLM article, and it was entitled, David Reed talked a lot about this, italics open inverted commas, italics stoppers, italics inverted commas. Only editors get excited by things like that, but I was very surprised that that was the title of the paper. It wouldn't get through now. David is the current editor, and I myself have edited FLM. Stoppers was an aspect of our experience that had grown in importance in that it had engaged and captured our interest. We defined a stopper as the moment when a pupil is no longer able to cope. There is an observable breakdown. Although my focus in this presentation is on the processes of doing research, inevitably, given my interests, it is worth stressing that these processes are in the service of developing mathematics teaching and learning. Joan talks about her work with a group of 3 teachers in the paper, and these 3 teachers wish to remain anonymous. I was one of those teachers. I look back at all the publications I have written since and wonder what on earth that was all about. But anyway, reading this paper again, strands of the researcher who developed out of this young teacher are apparent. Joan had been to a conference run by a guy called Stenhouse and was now trying out the principles of teachers' research as she had encountered there. Stenhouse wrote, "Curriculum, research and development ought to belong to the teacher." Stenhouse's critical characteristics of a teacher to whom curriculum development belongs should be, I say should, but in fact he wrote could, the commitment to a systematic questioning of one's own teaching as a basis for development. The commitment and the skills to study one's own teaching. The concern to question and to test theory and practice by use of those skills. As Joan Yates writes in the paper, our aim was to examine our own practice critically and systematically. Echoing, of course, Stenhouse's words. In so doing, we, the teachers, also acquired research skills. A particularly memorable for me article by Ginsberg, looking at clinical interviewing, included the sentence, "Verbalization can be misleading since the child may not have direct access to his, gender neutral in those days, cognitive processes, or may have poor command over language." In the paper, a substantial amount of the teachers' reflections on their children's mathematical thinking is included. My way of collecting data from 26 children to compare understanding of decimals without and with a calculator is described. I asked the children to show me what they do in written form before any verbalization. I was really affected by Ginsberg. So, here is a task for you to try first, and I am asking you to do this not because I am interested in all your answers, but because there will be a table of the children's results after it, and so it will help you to read that data. So, ready? I'm not going to read it out. I've taken the commas out because for some of you that would make you think it was a decimal point or something. Okay, got the idea? Ask yourself whether you ask children to do this sort of task. In the UK at that time, most children would work at calculations such as adding and subtracting with decimals, but would not have been asked to put them in order of size. What did our children understand about the numbers they were calculating with? I asked the children to space out and gave them a piece of rough paper each. I requested that they work on their own. On the blackboard, I wrote the list of numbers separated by commas, because in the UK it doesn't mean anything else. I gave the instruction, on one side of the paper, I'd like you to put these numbers in order of size, from smallest to biggest, and explain very clearly how you did it. They had 10 minutes, most only needed 5. Having collected the results together on the board, and I'm going to show table 1 next. There are some number things, because one child missed out one, so don't expect everything to add up to 26, which was the number of children. To set up a visible reminder of the different possibilities, the ones where there were discrepancies were pointed out. What takes your attention in table 1? The students were asked to turn over the piece of paper and could use a calculator to try to convince themselves if necessary and could now talk. So here's a table. I hope you can read it just about. Across the top, it's 2.19, 0.888, 1.6999, 699, 2.2, 1.8, 989. So this was the initial result of ordering the decimals and led to some discussion because 2 of the numbers seemed to have been swapped over. And some of you whose research interest this is will have all sorts of stories about why children think one is bigger than the other and so on. But what was important was having that table there. The discussions that followed led to some students changing their minds about their previous answers. Is this process teaching or researching, and for whom? Is it teaching and researching for the teacher? I get all sorts of data and information. But is it researching for the children? And what would it mean in our classrooms if there is researching applied to the children? Here I recognise what I would now see as my need, and it is a need, to base teaching and researching on something that the students or later prospective teachers do. So that's not interested in what they say they do. I might interview teachers about their practices in the classrooms, always where possible, linked with observing lessons. Stenhouse quotes Hamilton's 8 propositions, which are of interest to all who are concerned to observe teaching. The second of which is, students, or for that matter teachers, are never ignorant or know nothing. I believe passionately that children's and teachers' talk makes sense from their perspectives. My task as teacher and researcher is to learn their world. So it's not my judgment of this is wrong. It's my learning about what led them to say it. So I don't know whether Dave Pratt is here or not. He used to come to PME conferences. He's another UK maths educator. As a teacher about the time of the Stoppers research, I had some awareness of this sense-making process when Dave Pratt and I, then both teachers, began a conversation at an Association of Teachers of Mathematics weekend. We were sharing our practices and began exploring differences heatedly. As we continued talking, we started sharing the details of our practices rather than labels. The labels we'd started with were such things like, oh, my classroom's structured, or my classroom's open-ended. Observers, friends who kept returning to see if they could attract our attention, reported later the same evening, being surprised that we each now seemed to be talking heatedly from the opposite direction. Teachers in a particular context cannot be expected to see their classroom and report on it in the way that an experienced observer of many classrooms would. I'll give you just a second to read that, because I am sticking very closely to the text in the talk, for those of you who are not first language speakers. What is important is to hear what teachers say and see what they say through observing their classroom practice. So if somebody says that they do a lot of discussion in their classrooms and you go as an observer, an experienced observer, and don't see very much discussion from your point of view, that teacher may well be doing a lot more discussion than they were doing previously. I started to talk about the language a teacher uses about their practice being in the direction of their development or movement, what they were working on, talking in vectors rather than placing themselves on a continuum of practice that an observer could do. In narratively interviewing me for this plenary presentation, Alf drew attention to questions where my thoughts were stimulated in the direction of, quoting from Yeats. Alf, you offer 2 questions. When do I know something in mathematics? When do I know that another knows? Do those feel like questions that stayed with you? How do I know that they know? We have talked about the question in our writing. All it takes is a disturbance down the line, and I need to question what I know, How do prospective teachers know what their children know? What do they do to find out? I think it's a motivating question for which you don't have to have an answer. A shift was in recognizing that question as one of a class of helpful questions that a prospective teacher can ask in the process of starting to accrue a range of behaviors in their teaching. Then the recognition later on was labeling that as a purpose. What we now see as a basic level category. Here, it's you using a purpose before you had that label. When I first met you, I was inarticulate about my practice as a teacher educator. If I was going to be able to talk about what I did, then I had to have words to talk with. In those early papers, whenever we gave an example of a purpose, it was always, how do I know that they know? Here's you as a teacher using that purpose, quite a precious example. Because quite quickly you go on to use it as a teacher educator. Quite quickly you're supporting others to find their own purposes. Here's Joan having supported you to find that purpose for yourself. Through Alf narratively interviewing me, we had found an early example of what I then called a motivating question. It had emerged from the critical and systematic work in the group. At the time, it was a particular question. Over time, working with prospective mathematics teachers to identify their own motivating questions arising from the interrogation of their practice led to the labeling of such questions as purposes. These purposes became linked to me with basic level categories in the enactivist literature in that they lead to patterned actions in the world of the classroom. I now recognize stoppers as a motivating label, purpose, or basic level category for the research group in the paper. So, summary of the three themes. So, very, very early days, interviewing influenced by Ginsberg, giving children something to do to support their verbalization. Close observation of children in classrooms as a teacher-researcher, and close observation of my own actions as a teacher in a critical and systematic way. Researching in a collaborative group, Stenhouse, research as exploration and personal transformation, using each other in the group as critical friends to identify concepts with a direct link with practice, to interrogate, in this case, stoppers. So the first three papers, I'm going to spend, as I've just done, quite a bit of time on it. It's very early stuff, but it seems to me, if you're doing your PhD, that you are setting up a research agenda for your life. Not just for now. Your PhD doesn't end anything. It's the beginning of a story. So, paper 2, the influence of teachers on children's image of mathematics. So in 1988, I completed an M.Ed in maths education at the University of Bristol. I was also making the transition from being a teacher in a classroom to working in curriculum development at the Resources for Learning Development Unit. We were supporting groups of teachers to develop resources for the mathematics classroom. I was now a facilitator of a collaborative teacher research group, although the size of each group was at most 10 teachers, in line with RLDU policy, rather than 3. In 1995, I was full-time at the University of Bristol and wanted to submit a PME paper for the January deadline. I'd written a paper for FLM, and Marku, this has got things to say for your ethics. I'd written a paper for FLM, The Influence of Teachers on Children's Image of Mathematics, which is the second paper that I have chosen, reporting the findings from my master's dissertation. Reporting on this research and extending it slightly provided the focus of my first PME paper. The motivation for the dissertation research was devising a set of instruments which might allow me to explore whether a particular teacher did, in fact, influence the image of mathematics of their pupils in the same way. The individual's image of mathematics was the personal theory which an individual holds about mathematics at the present time, including feelings, expectations, experiences, and confidences. What I was looking for as an influence of the teacher on children's image of mathematics was a common change or adaptation of the pupils through working with the teacher. 4 teachers were chosen as being effective by advisory teachers in the local community, and they had contrasting structures in which they worked. So we had some individualized learning, some whole class interactive, etc. I did not believe there would be a common image. In limiting the number of children in the project to 6 for each teacher, I suggested the teachers choose 2 who did respond to whatever they did with the class, 2 who did not respond, and 2 to make up any imbalance in, say, gender. I knew that I wanted to interview the students and the teachers, making the process as similar as possible. In trialling various protocols for the student interviews, it became apparent that simply asking what mathematics is to them did not work. Would you expect it to? We needed to do some mathematics together, given potential issues with verbalization. The Ginsberg article used in paper 1 was important for interview strategies for doing mathematics. Each student chose 1 from 5 activities presented to them for us to work on together. In telling me about lessons they had experienced, the work of Hoyles in asking pupils to recall particular episodes was influential. In trialling the various protocols, I settled on 2 practices that seemed to support students in answering directly without the need to clarify. In early trials of questions, I had often been met by a blank face and, "What do you mean?" The first practice was asking what appeared to be long-winded questions where the precise wording developed over time, such as, I can still, given the number of times I said this, virtually repeat it. So I am going to make some statements, and for each one, see what is brought to mind by what I say. Try to remember the event so clearly that you can tell me a story about what happened. Tell me about an activity you have done recently in a maths lesson, and although you probably did not think so at the time, it is brought to mind now when I say, there you are, sitting in a maths lesson, and what you are doing feels like mathematics. These were not short, quick questions, but they did provoke responses. The second practice led to energized responses, what in the 1995 PME paper I called provoked articulation from the students. What I am interested in is your image of mathematics. So we've done some mathematics together. They've told me stories about their classrooms, when they thought they were doing mathematics, when they thought they were not doing mathematics. So far, you have indicated in your responses to the various statements and activities that mathematics is, and what I did was fill in that gap. Is there anything else you'd like to add that has not been covered so far to the question, what is mathematics to you? So, as an interviewer, I am attending carefully to what the interviewee is saying, with the intention of using as close to their words and phrasing as possible, feeding back to them my thoughts of, in this case, what they think mathematics is. The responses are what I, as a researcher, see as robust evidence. Provoked articulation is energetic. I have come to, when I'm interviewing, look for the times when somebody says, yes, 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 and. Or, no, no. What I think is, and so on. And I'd wanted the teachers and the children's statements of what mathematics was to look for any commonalities. These are the statements that I took as my evidence. The interviews lasted about half an hour, but I was just after those last statements. I was surprised at the time that whether the student responded to what their teacher did or not, their image of mathematics was influenced by the teacher. I share statements from Teacher C and 2 of the 6 children from the class as an example. There were other patterns for the other 3 teachers and their children. I was struck in all the interviews by the question, where are the children who don't like mathematics? What did these teachers do that led to engagement? My partial answer now would be that the teachers had conviction in what they were doing. So, Teacher C had an influence through what I'll call philosophy. I think the whole idea of problem is that you model it and make it solvable. Mathematics is a framework and maths teaching is fun. Fun when you see the children building their own frameworks, which are not necessarily your frameworks. What did the pupils say? Well, pupil C1 said, you've got to actually solve things for yourself which aren't in a book. That's not really what I thought maths was going to be in the earlier years, because that was just numeral sort of maths. You can relate it more to things outside. It's not just like a picture on the board. You can imagine it. And pupil C6, there was a real problem there. I understood what was happening, and there were so many different types of maths used to find the final answer. Maths was numbers to me. I felt that in maths, everyone knew the answer, but as time's gone on, I've discovered that even Teacher C doesn't know all the answers. So maths has changed. You can experiment. I also wanted to observe lessons and planned one observation before the interview and one after. In fact, I gained little from the post-interview observations since the children interviewed were intent on carrying on the interactions. In observing in Teacher C's classroom, I was struck by seeing a teaching strategy reportedly they had seen used previously in a primary school. So I called it a transferable strategy because I thought at the time that's what I might be looking for. So a pupil offered an explanation of how they had begun to tackle a problem. The other pupils were invited to close their eyes and put up their hand if they had started in the same way. An alternative start was requested, and the pupils again closed their eyes and put up their hands if this was their way of starting. The process continued with more information being collected, and these different starts were then used for further explanation, i.e., what was the aim of the people who drew the radius. So we're going to try and just model this briefly, impossible here, I know. But I'm going to go on to the next slide, and you will have 10 seconds not to finish the problem, but to recognize how you would begin it, just in the same way as Teacher C. I will then tell you one way of beginning, and you'll all close your eyes and put your hand up if you began that way. We won't be able to then collect all your different answers, but we'll give it a go. So are you ready? You will have 10 seconds starting from now. Right, okay. What I'm interested in is how you began, and I'm going to say, who thought, oh, that's going to be too big, and just started thinking 2, 4, 8, 16. Close your eyes. Hands up if that's how you began. Right, brilliant. I'd love to know all the other ways that you began. Now, I did ask my ex-PhD students to be able to near me so they could shout one. Rachel, could you shout how you began? Because you didn't have your hand up. Nice, okay, so this was, what would 2 to the power, I can't even remember what it was now, 643, I just made that up. What would that look like? Put your hand up if you did the division by 7 first or early. Hands up, anybody do the division by 7 first? Yeah, so we've got some people who did that. Now, in a class of 30, he could go round and he could collect all the different beginnings. And so, for those of you who didn't begin at all, because 10 seconds isn't time for me, the children who were stuck or had no ideas would get ideas from others in the room. So, one of the children in the room, when interviewed, said, there are several solutions to one problem. If you go around the class asking, you'll come up with 6 or 7. You can experiment like a real mathematician. Looking back from an activist perspective now, I find it hard to imagine that I so strongly thought I would not see any common strand across the students and their teachers. How could I possibly not have believed that? Teacher C's strategy links directly to that pupil's experience. Teacher C's strategies is one that I have used in my own teaching and told other people about, like I'm telling you. Thinking of questions for future research at the end of the paper, I thought I might look for what I called transferable strategies in future research. What has happened is that my focus has been at the level above, the meta level, to the actual strategies that might be called transferable strategies. The purposes or basic level categories, such as how do I know, that lead to a range of teaching behaviours being employed flexibly or building frameworks for Teacher C. In our online discussion, Alf reported noticing in the paper me using a purpose, is this a classroom in which it's all right to be wrong, as a way of analysing teacher and pupil behaviours in the early days of moving from being a teacher to visiting other people's classrooms. I mean, that experience of being in your own classroom to visiting other people's classrooms, for me was extraordinary. You know, surprise, recognition, difference, sameness. And consequently, through reflection, personal learning. I don't know how I would teach in the classroom anymore because I've seen too many experiences that I would want to try to use. In the same way as Teacher C gets pleasure from his students building their own frameworks, as a mathematics teacher educator, I watch my prospective teachers developing through identifying purposes, encouraging them to talk and write about stories from their classroom, illustrating resonance or dissonance. And here's one such story from one of my PGCE students. I wrote the question on the board asking for hands up. The first child gave me the answer, to which I said, correct. Belatedly, I asked if anyone else had anything different, but of course the children were then unwilling to offer an alternative answer that they now knew was definitely wrong. I realized immediately that I could not now see what the rest of the children had done. Since that occasion, I have been attempting to gain answers from several members of the class. An advantage in listing the variety of answers to a question is to show the children that they are not alone in making a mistake and that others have had the same or different problems. Similarly, multiple equivalent answers can be highlighted, whereas otherwise a child may feel that their answer is wrong just because it does not look identical or is in a different form. Hence, the art as a teacher of being expressionless, as a variety of answers are given to a problem, appears to be a very useful one. Now, I don't think that all of you here, if you were teaching children, needed to be expressionless. That's why the transferable skills are not at the level of a behavior. But for this teacher, being expressionless is linked to solving a practical problem in their classroom. So it's the student teacher or the prospective teacher's adaptation to the problems they find in their own classroom. So it's linked to learning. The identification of a purpose, such as being expressionless, is energizing for the prospective teacher in the same way as you get the energizing of the what is mathematics for the children being interviewed. I learned that there is not one way to teach mathematics from this project, but that what is important is a conviction in an image of mathematics that provides a consistent classroom culture. In the narrative interview with Alf related to this paper, I was energized a number of times by other awarenesses about my research process. So the first one was, I was just saying them telling their stories, and the talk is interviewing as people telling their stories. I think that's where my conviction came, that you don't do interpretation in a classroom. You collect the data. When I was visiting prospective teachers to observe them teach, I would ask them what they wanted my focus of observation to be, what they were working on at the time, looking for a purpose, I suppose, so that they would be researchers and get fed back data from my observations. Now, I need to know how long I've got left, because I have a decision to make. Yes, okay. So I'll just begin story and then zoom to the 10 minutes place, because you've got it all written in the book anyway. What you hear, though, is my stress, which is different to how you read it, of course, because you read your history, not my history. So the Story of Maths paper came from a project called Curriculum Materials to Support Courses Bridging the Gap Between GCSE and A-Level. And GCSE and A-Level are terminal examinations in the UK at 16 and 18 plus. So in the earlier research, the final point had been, these comments encapsulate the importance of seeing the story of mathematics so that it has a coherence both in its teaching and in the experience of students. This finding is closely related to the mathematical competence and vision of individual effective teachers. So the research questions for the project were, what are the stories of their mathematics for individual effective teachers? How do their strategies and purposes in the teaching of mathematics support the doing of mathematics of their students? What stories are there within mathematics itself that can give an holistic sense of connections? What are the big ideas for mathematics? This design became a large project funded by our ESRC. And actually, the design of projects from this stage stayed pretty much the same for me, all contingent on the research groups I worked with. So I had 3 teachers chosen because they did seem to bridge that gap. So there wasn't a problem between 16 and 18. They were smooth. And they were paired with 3 researchers, and we met 3 times over 6 months, developing a common language. And it was the teachers talking to each other, developing the language that I was interested in. So my experience in the Stenhouse-influenced group is apparent here. So between the first and second meetings of the group, the researchers observed their teacher pair, and each of the teachers was interviewed by me. The second meeting focused on the interviews and observational data, common threads being identified. And in the last meeting, the teachers wrote lesson descriptions to illustrate the samenesses in practice identified. The teachers' voices are given the space here in the paper, and labels such as same, different, being a pedagogical tool through which mathematical ideas of order, inverse, pattern, and structure can be explored, emerging from them, akin to how stoppers emerged in the first paper. The interviews focused on 2 research questions, but for each big idea or teaching strategy, there was an invitation to give an anecdote from a recent lesson. This was interviewing as people telling stories. Comments and observing. So each researcher used the transcript of the interview of their teacher to inform their observations of the teacher's lessons. The researchers looked for evidence from practice to illustrate what the teacher had described during the interview. The researcher aims to capture what is said and what is done, not give judgment or interpretation. And later we supported our work by using video. In the design of the project, we had overlooked a central emergent theme from the data analysis. These teachers are able to make their teaching contingent upon the story of mathematics of their children. I returned to teacher C, his pleasure in his students building their own frameworks. Staying with the detail of these 3 teachers' practices led to a new awareness, showing a pattern rather than the isolated case of teacher C. Transferable strategies, what I thought I needed to be looking for at the end of my master's study, are at the wrong level. What was central were the motivating labels or purposes, basic level categories, that could be linked to a complex set of developing mathematics and teaching strategies used by an individual teacher. These can look different in the same way as chairs do, while the same label is used. Yeah, no, perfect. I know where I am. It's great. So, the last 3 papers, I'm only going to look at one thing in each paper because they're recent, they're dense. Go and read the papers. A doctoral student who was interested to read some of the writing of her supervisors, myself and Alf, reported that she had found our recent work hard to access. Hence, because it's dense, it's been going on for 25, 30 years. But earlier papers inspiring. So that led me to discuss in detail those first 3 papers. So let's have a look. Paper 4, interviewing. So this is from a book chapter, Mapping the Territory Using Second-Person Interviewing Techniques to Narratively Explore the Lived Experience of Becoming a Maths Teacher Educator. So in writing this paper, I'd been an activist for 25 years. Its theoretical underpinnings are an activist. The focus of the paper is on the articulations of an expert teacher moving themselves from being in a classroom to supporting teachers. By now, I'm using a well-developed protocol that's come from a woman called Petit Mengen. In the enactivist literature, I'm very much influenced by somebody called Varela, and Petit Mengen was a PhD student of Varela. Varela himself is RIP. The first of these habitual now ways of being when I'm interviewing is, she gives it the word stabilizing attention. And she says it's a regular reformulation by the interviewer of what the interviewee has said, asking for a recheck of accuracy, often in response to a digression or judgment. And this reminded me of when in the early days I'd asked about mathematics. It was the same sort of thing. I was sort of asking the children to reformulate by feeding back to them where I thought they were on the mathematics. The second one is turning the attention from what to how, never why. Do you ask why when you interview people? I still do from time to time, I have to say, but I've realized that the why takes them away from the detail, the potential to learn, and leaves them talking about these top labels like I did with Dave Pratt. Moving from a general representation to a singular experience, and this is what we term story, so we got to reenact, relive our past. So that asking the children to tell me stories about their lessons. The fourth protocol is through working with Alf and encapsulates our take on learning through adapting basic level categories. They were originally described in the first 3 papers as purposes or motivating questions. So getting to new basic level categories. After dwelling in the detail, telling stories and exploring without judgment or digressions, the invitation is to elicit statements of what is being worked on. And in this way, new basic level categories that staying with the detail can allow those labels to emerge, like listening for or setting up the culture. These awarenesses triggering and being triggered by the environment can allow adapted and new behaviors to emerge. The density of this writing compared to the earlier papers is clear and gives some insight into our learning over more than 20 years. Working with prospective teachers, I had developed a story of how they learned to teach, and here I am applying those ideas to my learning about moving from being a teacher to being a teacher-educator. So let's have a look at observing. Another book chapter, Learning to Teach Mathematics, the lesson debrief conversation, focus on the observation of prospective teachers, followed by discussions with them and their mentor after the lesson. It is important to stay with what the prospective teacher is able to notice, what we call staying with the detail. And this is linked to asking them what their focus of observation is before the lesson. A prospective teacher is not sure what they want the culture of their classroom to be, but in getting to a label such as being expressionless for your own behavior, we have come to recognize what we call meta-commenting by experienced teachers, especially in the early days of working with a new class. What is seen by the teacher as mathematical behaviors by students, such as getting organized or looking for a counterexample, are shared so that students know what to do in mathematics, to do mathematics. Over time, some of these behaviors are favored by the students, and the teacher does not then need to meta-comment. It's a culture of doing mathematics has been established. In that paper, we use fictionalized accounts. Participants are anonymized and parts from several stories are brought together, stressing important principles and practice. There's an FLM when I was editor paper that Marco wrote on fictionalizing experiences. Fictionalized experiences. And I would recommend you to go and read that paper because we were using it in our current writing. So I went from people telling me not to use story because it was fiction to the strengths of using fictionalized accounts by bringing together the important aspects of a number or a range of experiences. So we've only got a few slides left, and the researching in collaborative groups. This was a paper that was written, an academic journal paper, Differentiation from an Advanced Standpoint, Outcomes of Mathematics Teachers' Action Research Studies Aimed at Raising Attainment. So, the principles for running a collaborative group, I was originally in 3, then we went to 10. 10 pretty much stayed. I'm not very good at scaling up because I'm down there in the work of the small groups. So the group size should be less than or equal to 10. Meetings should be spread out over an extended period of time. The teachers should come from a range of schools and be volunteers, not conscripts. I don't see how you can scale up and get volunteers, not conscripts. And it's just about me. You know, I'm very happy for others to do it. The leader of the group gives individual readings, and the leader of the group will also make one or more visits to the schools. So the paper focuses on a subset of teachers researching in a collaborative group with a focus on using higher level contact with groups of low attainers. Each of the teachers' research was to be written up as part of a master's module. One teacher gives the following reasons, grounded in her practice, for extending the syllabus for those children. In the UK, we have low attaining classes, as we call them. We don't have mixed groups. It's terrible. I'm not pro it, but it's the situation in which we live. A student was able to tell me that the square root of 49 is 7, 2 weeks having studied Pythagoras' theorem, which they would not have been allowed, so they have a reduced curriculum, which they would not have been taught before. This was one of those factors that led me to think I should try teaching these students more of the difficult topics, not just for them to try and grasp these harder topics, because they might take something else away from it. So I'm going to just very, very briefly say something about looking to the future. What's my vision of all this in practice? In 2018, I traveled to Indonesia to give a keynote entitled Global Needs, Rethinking Teaching and Learning Mathematics for Future Changes. So I ended that talk saying, we need citizens with higher order thinking skills to provide creative suggestions for whatever happens in an uncertain future. It just might be that cross-curricular teams of teachers working with students on real complex problems will become the norm for schooling. So what happens to our maths education then? Oh, right. Okay. So the picture is of a man called Bronson Parrish, who's graduating from the Green School, Bali. And there they have to have solved a problem to exit the school. Many villages on Bronson's home island, Sumba, have no power or running water, even though it is surrounded by water, continually moving. And the presentation, his exit presentation, is his story of his practical ideas that he wants to be available. And he makes a prototype. I mean, go and watch it. It's amazing. I've got the link in the paper. So this is one student's journey, solving a real problem in his community. Last slide. So my vision of the future is linked to these collaborative research groups. The teachers as researchers, the children as researchers. So teachers being led by their students who are building frameworks within real contexts that are not the teachers' frameworks, and it makes me really optimistic for the future. Researching in collaborative groups with teachers gives me a vision of future schooling in which teachers are supporting children researching in collaborative groups to solve real problems in their communities. And because I'm a mathematician, the maths will always be there for me. But we need the children of today to be able to apply mathematics within their communities in the world in which we are currently living. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Laurinda, for your wonderful lecture. So now we are going to present the reactor of the plenary, and as I have said before, these are the words of the chair, Salvador Linares. So it is his pleasure to present David Reid from the University of Agder, Mathematics, Norway. He is the editor-in-chief of the Learning of Mathematics, for the Learning of Mathematics. His research interests are focused on proof and proving, digital tools in algebra learning, sociological perspectives on the emergence of disparity in mathematics achievement, and comparative perspectives on mathematics pedagogy. Then activism as a theory of learning and methodology has framed his research activity, and he has served as editor of CDM issue 47.2 about a nativist methodology in mathematics education research. He has been the researcher leader of Observing Teachers Mathematics Pedagogy in Regions of Canada project. Welcome, David, to PME45, and thanks for your acceptance.
Thank you very much, Thaneda, for those kind words, and for Salvador for writing them. Laurinda has attempted fairly successfully to compress decades of work into 16 pages in the proceedings and 60 minutes here. And what I'd like to do is spend my time focusing in on 3 of the central ideas in what we've just heard from my point of view. If I can figure out which button to push. There we go. So, first, I'd like to remark that everything said is said by an observer. So, these observations are going to be my observations on Laurinda's observations on her long history as a mathematics teacher educator. The first idea I'd like to talk about is the last point that Laurinda talked about, Laurinda's vision of future schooling in which teachers are supporting children, researching in collaborative groups to solve real problems in their communities. And more generally, the question that she mentioned in the middle of her talk, that she asked some students, what is mathematics? I've watched the video and a few of the others from the school, and it's very impressive what Bronson Parrish and his classmates have accomplished. And I know of very many other stories of young people who have solved very important problems in their communities with and sometimes without the support of their mathematics teachers. In talking about Teacher C's classroom, Laurinda also talked about a different kind of problem solving, where the focus isn't on solving a problem in the world, but a problem in the mathematics classroom. Here's what some of the pupils said about solving mathematics, about problem solving and this kind of problem solving and the mathematics. So one talked about mathematics is problem solving. In Connect 4, which is a game, I'd start by experimenting on a smaller grid to see if there's any pattern and be able to predict, maybe changing the number of counters which you have to make a row. And then another pupil, Laurinda has already used this quote, but I'm going to reuse it, said, yeah, you can experiment like a real mathematician. In these cases, the problems weren't earth-shaking problems of how to provide water to a community that has no clean water, but they offered these pupils very important ways to think about mathematics. And they'd offered them a different vision of what mathematicians do than the one that they were used to from their prior schooling. So this gives two answers to the question, what do real mathematicians do? Real mathematicians solve real problems in their communities. These are modeling problems such as disease transmission, climate change, environmental degradation, and more. But being a real mathematician also involves solving problems that don't have any obvious application in the wider world, but that provide experiences with important processes like generalization, abstraction, reasoning, communication. In my work, I'm interested in another thing that mathematicians do, and that's the mathematical activity of conjecturing and proving new mathematics. These three visions, which could be characterized as mathematics as modeling, mathematics as problem solving, and mathematics as proving, are three answers to the question, what is it that real mathematicians do? And I think they're essential to understanding what mathematics is, the question that Laurinda asked so long ago. All of these different ways of answering this question need to be a part of the mathematics education that we're engaged in. Another aspect that I'm worried about, I don't think that the kinds of problems that we need to solve are just practical problems of how to provide clean water to our communities. I think that, or I worry that perhaps, mathematics education has contributed to the decline of evidence-based logical argument in social discourse, which has given room for the rise of a discourse of rhetoric and fear instead. That we haven't risen to the challenge of providing a good model of what it means to reason using logic in real contexts. And perhaps we haven't even given a very good model of what it means to reason using logic in mathematics. So I would like to see, my vision of the future would be for mathematics to be a context for evidence-based logical arguments, so that the students in our classroom who will go forward to make decisions in the societies that they live in the future will have an option to making decisions rather than on the basis of rhetoric and fear. This isn't something that we can fix in the short term, but I hope that mathematics could be such a context. So that is my optimistic vision. The second idea I'd like to talk about is basic level categories a little bit, because this is something Laurinda mentioned a few times, and I think it might be a place in the paper and in the talk where trying to condense decades of work into a few minutes ends up being a bit dense. So if you were wondering about this idea, it's a concept that comes from ethnobiology, linguistics, and psychology. Eleanor Roche, whose picture I put up there, is one of several people who have been very key in developing this idea. And it refers to categories that fall into the most cognitively effective level of categorization, whatever that means. It boils down to they're not too specific and they're not too general. They convey the information that's really useful to us in that context. And the example that I always use is if I ask you what this is a picture of, there are 5 correct answers to that question among many, but you're likely to pick the one in the middle. You're likely to say that's a picture of a dog. That's the basic level category that falls into. It's usually the useful label to give to that animal. It's not always, though. Basic level categories aren't the only kind of categories. If I'm looking for my sister's dog, I do not go down the street calling out, "Dog, dog." But most of the time, basic level categories are the categories that we need. And I think that one of Laurinda's greatest contributions is to focus in on the idea of basic level categories in mathematics teacher education. And the idea, the original label of purposes captures that level at which it is useful to talk with future teachers and current teachers about their practices. Purposes fall in this sort of just right Goldilocks zone, if you like, for describing teaching in ways that can be usefully reflected on. And this is what we wrote about them in an article that emerged from a research forum at PME45. Purposes are similar to basic level categories. I'd now say they are basic level categories in the context of teacher behaviors and their general image of teaching in mathematics. They fill a middle position between behaviors that are too specific to be used as a model and general images of teaching in mathematics that are too loosely linked to actions to be useful guides. If you haven't run into this work before, I really encourage you to. I thought it was really very interesting. And I think actually that there's a wider lesson that we could learn, not just in mathematics teacher education, but I think in mathematics education generally, that we should perhaps spend more time trying to decide what are the basic level categories and what we're talking about. There is value in high-level descriptions like deep learning, and also value in specific examples of what happened in one context to one person. But both high-level descriptions and examples are unlikely to really suggest the basic level categories that they bookend. unless we name and describe those as well. And I find this clearly in teacher education, that if I give some broad category to my students, they don't see how to make that specific enough to use in a classroom. And if I give a nice example to my students, they don't see how to make that broader enough to use in a classroom. So, but I think we can also think about that in terms of all aspects of mathematics education and ask ourselves, what is the level here that is the basic level that we want to talk about? And finally, I'd like to talk a little bit about stories, which is almost where Laurinda started. And coming back again to Maturana's comment that everything said is said by an observer. Laurinda tells stories about her observations. And you might ask, well, what stops these stories from just being Laurinda's idiosyncratic musings about what she has seen in some classrooms? Well, everything said is said by an observer to another observer. Laurinda's stories are told to someone, and often with someone, in reciprocal narrative interviews and in collaborative groups. The voices of Laurinda's many collaborators can be heard in her stories, even when they're nominally just her story. And equally, her voice can be heard in the stories told by those who have worked with her. So that's my story about stories. Every observation is a story said by someone. Telling stories to and with others, sharing stories makes them relevant, shared contributions to a community. Every research report you will see presented this week, every transcript and every statistics, is a story, an observation that is said by someone. Every discussion is an interview, an opportunity for you to get a deeper insight into the presenter's story. All these stories are being told in a collaborative group called PME. Your participation, like everyone else's, helps to make the work of this group successful. Gracias. Yep. Oh, you.
Okay, so then they said I had to react to the reaction, but it is online, and you'll be pleased to know that it lasts 3 minutes when I read it. Because it seems to me that you can come and meet me tomorrow and we can talk. And I hope that David might be there too. So thank you, David. That's what I want to say first and foremost. You focus on 3 points, and I'll try to say something about each of them. Not much, because time is passing. Conversations can continue throughout the conference. What do real mathematicians do? Well, there doesn't feel to be one mathematics or one image of mathematics for all people. I was struck again when preparing my plenary PowerPoint that when interviewing, I ask what and how questions, never why. Conjecturing and proving as an activity is designed to answer the question why. This makes mathematics, in that aspect, a different order of thing, and yet proving itself can be done in many ways. Would you accept a visual proof? Or a computer proof of the four-color theorem? Why did Ramanujan's mathematics need Hardy's proof? I agree we need all aspects of mathematics. Oh, now what? It's a bit late to break it. Yeah. So, Bronson's might be seen as an elite and distant story. But such examples do make me optimistic about the future. How can we work with our students to see mathematics as meaningful and powerful today, relevant to their lives now? In 1976, I attended a closing lecture of a professional teaching association conference where we were challenged to go out and do mathematics in the streets and marketplaces with the unemployed and school rejectors. That was at the beginnings of computerization, where the fields of Cambridgeshire, which grew bird's eye peas or something, were now being mechanized, and the jobs didn't exist anymore. I went back to my own school where I was teaching, and on asking my students in school whether there was anything in the local community that was an issue for them, they talked about the major crossroads in the community with no traffic lights. It was a major road, and it was very dangerous, and there were deaths every year of children. What information would we need to present to the councillors so that this issue could be addressed? The traffic lights came quite a long time later, but the report was said to have been influential in the decision-making. This is something in 1976 that could be done, but you don't see much of it around in UK schools at the moment. Right, basic level categories. It hasn't gone, yeah. Basic level categories. I can imagine a PME working group thinking about your idea of describing concepts such as deep learning, not only by examples at the detail level and at the high level, not linked to action, but also in a way that supports our community in learning at the basic level. I will continue to think about this. In telling my development retrospectively, the move through motivating questions to purposes to basic level categories is perhaps mysterious, but thank you for saying more about an activist ideas, and thank you, Gabrielle, for ZDM issue 47.2. Go, people, and read that. It's got more thoughts about an activist methodologies. And the last point, Alf and I have been asked on many occasions, why isn't what we do laissez-faire? Laissez-faire is a funny sort of word, really, but anything goes. But you addressed directly the question of what stops this plenary full of stories being idiosyncratic musings. Quoting your response to your own question, telling stories to and with others, sharing stories, makes them relevant back to what a story is, that little knot or complex of a thing called relevance. Shared contributions to a community. And communities are always changing. So stories have to be re-rehearsed and change as the world and the community changes. Yes, much of my work is collaborative. So thank you to all fellow storytellers. Your voices are part of mine, and mine are yours. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, David. Thank you very much, Laurinda. We don't have too much time for questions, but remember that you can meet Laurinda, you can ask questions, you can provide comments tomorrow between 9 and 9:14 during the same slot that research reports won in room 8 in the Faculty of Education. So, thank you very much. Now we have the reception and from the local committee.
Hello again. Please, just to finish, give me 2 minutes to give you some important updates for today. So these updates are for tomorrow morning, okay, before the plenary 2. There has been a change in the short oral. The OC 106 has moved to the OC 201 on Thursday. Also, there have been some cancellations, the OC 103 and the research report 112. And we have also some changes regarding the chair. In the research report 113, the new chair is Cynthia Carson. In the research report 103, the new chair is Marco Janula. And in the short oral 106, the new chair is Maria Antonieta Lepeyer. All these changes are available now in ConfTool and also in the web program. Okay? Thank you very much and enjoy the welcome reception.